I don't know if that's totally true, but I feel that you're looking at it from a tinted, privileged, white guilt glint.
Welcome to the Nouveau podcast, the podcast that models healthy communication for men, empowering them to start the journey of self-work. Now here's your host, Thomas Pierce.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. This week, my guest is Eloka Obi. Obi is a buddy of mine from playing college rugby. He has a double major in statistics and environmental studies, along with a minor in mathematics, and he's on his way to grad school to study artificial intelligence. So obviously a very smart guy. And we talked about many of the kind of recurring issues of the past few weeks. So namely the topic of race and disparate outcomes in our country. But Obi brings a different perspective, I would say, than the normal line that we've talked about on the show. And he challenged me a bit on why I have the opinions I have and explained, why he came to the opinions that he holds. And it was great. I think it's a really interesting conversation and also fulfills the mission of the show, which is to promote and model healthy communication for men. That's exactly what we did here, and I hope you enjoy it. So big thanks to Obi, and enjoy the show. And we're live. Hey, Obi. Good evening, man. How you doing?
I'm all right, TP. Can I call you TP or should I call you Thomas to be more formal?
No, I'm professional now. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, of course. Nice, dude. So you were just telling me you're in DC. So Obi and I met when we were playing rugby. Like all good relationships, started playing rugby.
Yeah, rugby team 2016.
Yeah, man. Did you keep playing after? Hell yeah. Nice, man. How did you like it?
It was great, to be honest. Ups and downs, but I thought we had a pretty good team the last 2 years that I was on the team. Nice,
dude. Yeah, I mean, rugby for me was and is a great conduit for personal growth, and I think looking back, that environment is so cool. It's a lot of young people who are kind of finding themselves and finding out, what they're about. And we were really lucky to have really consistent coaching. And yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, it was awesome. And the team got better, but I believe that the team got better because many of the motivations and the values of the team changed mercurially and drastically. We stopped being a drinking team, drinking team that played rugby and a rugby team that had maybe a few drinks on the weekend.
Yeah, dude, absolutely. I mean that regretfully that was my era that kind of brought in that that over drinking and kind of sideways priorities, and that was something I really was not happy about on the way out. Because I don't know, there's definitely a place for it, and I'm not trying to say that people shouldn't party, but yeah, I think the thing that differentiated us from just a fraternity, for example, or a bunch of guys who only drink was that we were training hard and trying to be in good shape and trying to compete and win tournaments and win leagues.
Yeah, I believe that probably the talent was probably a little bit better, and maybe not better, but there was a different personnel. Let's say that there was a different type of personnel that allowed us to play a certain type of way. The rugby, the quality of the rugby became more dynamic. We were able to implement new techniques, new plays that really set us apart from many of the other teams. It wasn't just as one-dimensional as I remember it from the earlier years.
Yeah. Right on, man. Well, we can and we'll talk rugby, I think, a lot in the future too. But, we came kind of with a more particular framework. So you heard my chat with Lee B, and kind of reached out, and thank you so much for doing that and wanting to come on the show. Just so to frame kind of the discussion, I would say, where are you coming from, intellectually? What's your framework? And what are the kind of core topics in the books that you were looking to have us chop it up on?
Well, I'm not a Black Studies major or a humanities guy per se. I'm a STEM guy. I have an undergrad degree in statistics, a minor in mathematics, and another major in environmental studies. I am going to Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago, for artificial intelligence. So I wouldn't describe myself as some humanities, philosophical thinker, some social theorist, or anything like that. Mm-hmm. I would describe myself more as, again, an engineer. But I have a lot of experiences with, I guess, the social climate within the United States because I've lived in the United States my whole entire life. And I come at it from a multitude of perspectives, the son of immigrants, being Black, being a male, which has a lot of different connotations and differences compared with females, growing up a lot differently from many kids who tend to look like me.
Yeah, totally. And very well expressed, man, that kind of understanding your identity. And Anthony, who, I don't know if you heard that episode with one of my buddies, and he's the director of D&I at my high school, and he kind of broke down for us, like, what are the different points of identity that influence how we're socialized and how society views us and how we view ourselves. So yeah, man, that's interesting. So you mentioned that your lived experience is going to be different than other Black guys. It was my understanding. Is that what you meant?
I would say so. Yes.
Okay. What are those things?
I grew up in I guess you could call it a upper middle class background. My dad was a doctor, a pharmacist. He was a clinical pharmacist. He came from Nigeria about 40 years ago. He came here specifically for an education visa, specifically to advance his educational goals. And he decided to go to pharmacy school at Northeastern. And then he ended up working at prestigious institutions like Harvard and Johns Hopkins.
Okay.
And UMass.
Nice. So that's a different upbringing from like a lot of people. That's just as far as like the intellectual. It sounds like your family is very intelligent and accomplished, which is awesome, man.
Yeah. Well, immigrants, they tend to, have a different drive and a different ethic because of where they specifically come from. A lot of people don't understand what's inside the mind of a lot of immigrants and many of their motivations. People, it always seems that, the ethnic groups who do the most well in this country usually have a different ethnic background from, the majority. They have different motivations that propel them, and they kind of tend to instill that into their kids. I'm, I guess, a product of that, and many of the people in my family have been the products of that as well. My cousins, a lot of them are medical doctors, pharmacists, lawyers, master's degrees.
Yeah, that's awesome, dude. Yeah. So I think that's a great point, man, because I think a lot of non-immigrant or non-naturalized Americans would never really conceive of that or think about, just like coming to a new country and realizing that there is this goal of citizenship and that, the extra work they have to do and the fear of potentially losing their place to, their place and their right to be in the new country and,
yes,
making relationships, making families, putting down roots, and then still having that potentially ripped away.
Yes, absolutely. And there's often a language barrier, and this is what I wanted to talk about specifically because this was a topic that came up in the CRT book, which we both read this past week.
I didn't read all of it. I have to put my hands up. I did the Cliff Notes though, in addition to making a good attempt at it.
Well, I can pretty much. It's pretty easy to summarize.
So before you dive in, CRT, what is that for the audience?
Well, CRT is a theory that specifically, you could say, talks about the social dimensions of race and what race encompasses in our society. So specifically, they're trying to say, I'm going to say this as simply as possible, racism is very much ingrained into our institutions, subtly institutionally, and this impacts minorities very greatly in the scheme of things. And this is the reason why we have many of the racial disparities that we currently see now between blacks, whites, Asians, and Latinos. Blacks and Latinos are the marginalized groups, and I guess whites specifically are thought to be the oppressors.
For sure. And I thought that was interesting. I thought it was interesting the juxtaposition between the CRT book and the other two books that you had me have a look at. So Discrimination and Disparities by Thomas Sowell.
Yes.
And Please Stop Helping Us by Jason Riley. Because those two books are kind of in opposite philosophical camps in some ways to the CRT book. Not in the sense that they deny the presence of racism or the history of racism, but rather they kind of look at the downstream effects, and they don't relate everything back to the systemic ingrained nature of racism in the systems. They take a from my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but they seem to take almost like a more individualistic mindset of saying that everyone's responsible for themselves, and there's a danger and a inherent problem with kind of disseminating this mindset of for young black people, this is the system in place, this is the kind of environment I was born into, and these other two authors are kind of saying that's not particularly helpful or reflected in the data. So I thought that was really interesting because those kind of are in different camps. And yeah, where do you kind of make between those two ends of the spectrum? Where do you find yourself personally?
I don't really classify myself as a Republican or a Democrat or a conservative or liberal. I try to take whatever I like from both sides and see what would be right for the majority of Americans. So I never wanted to group myself in that sense because it just really limits you on the way you tend to ideate, the way you tend to think, the way you tend to act. Everyone's trying to put people in categories here in America today when no one really knows the full story about where people come from. So I choose to be neutral subjects like these. Well, it's neutral on the categorizations because I don't see myself as a category. But I stand on the spectrum of I do believe that there is racism in America, but I don't believe that it's the reason why minorities today have such disparate outcomes compared to the majority group in the society.
For sure. So you don't kind of take on face value that these downstream effects are solely at the feet of the history and the kind of systemic racism.
I believe that there are remnants of systemic racism, but it's been a whole generation, 50, 60 years since the passing of the Civil Rights Act that has given Black Americans and all Americans really their civil rights and their constitutional rights. Many of the disparities that we see today have grown larger, have become larger since the Civil Rights Act. Would you say this is? Is this down to racism, right? Where there's more racism now than there was 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago? Or could this be another issue that, people are just too scared to deal with.
Yeah, it's layered. Yeah, I think ideologically, I probably would fall more in the CRT camp. So just based on the nature of the resources and how resources are distributed, especially opportunities. And I think how those opportunities are distributed would be where I kind of fall in line more with the CRT, just based on, if somebody's born into a place where there's not a lot of people in their lives and their families who are achieving and are successful, and coupled with things like the war on drugs and mass incarceration that decimate families, in the sense of if a parent or an older sibling or a grandparent is incarcerated federally, and then especially with the advent of mandatory minimums, they're gone for a huge chunk of that person's life. So this is all very anecdotal, but like I can really empathize with somebody who grew up in that space, because if they didn't have those great role models and people killing it in their lives, then that's like I get it, and especially that coupled with, if say they're going to a really underfunded public school, all of those things, I really can see how these patterns come about, and how I don't know this to be the case, and this is just a guess, but I would imagine, in those environments there could be like a palpable negativity maybe, or just a sense of hopelessness. Like, and if that's the case, I get it. So then if we look at structurally, how do those things come about? I guess what I'm saying is that, like, if those patterns keep repeating themselves over and over, I would be more likely to kind of blame the system rather than the individuals in it. I think is kind of, to long story long, how I came to that.
Right. Where I see the issue is that the system is not totally fair. I have to say that, and I'm a pretty fiscally conservatively leaning guy. Life's not fair. There's certain things I wonder why that happened to me. Why this has happened to this person or that person. It's not fair. The system isn't totally fair. Life's not fair, but we often have to overcome adversity, right? We as people have to man up. We have to woman up. We have to not just sit down and let people just spit on us. We have to fight back. And that's why I say to a lot of Black people regarding this issue, racism, white supremacy, it's just more adversity in your life. Again, I'm not going to come here and say that racism isn't real. Racism is real. It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that human beings can tend to be evil in this way, but that's not really an excuse to not want to do anything with your life and just sit down and just succumb to the racist oppression. Being 23-year-old Black male in America, I've seen how people can react to you. I understand, the microaggressions, people, I guess, being scared of you, wanting to cross the sidewalk, when they're coming down at you, people talking to you in a certain way, in a ghetto fashion, because they think that, you're not intelligent enough or articulate enough to speak in proper English. People assuming whatever about you. You may not have a father. You may not have a good home life. I understand all of that, but it's not a reason to just keel over and not want to do anything with your life.
Yeah, 100%, dude. And I think, especially with the context of your family and their story coming to the States, your parents wouldn't have succeeded and achieved what they've achieved if they had the attitude of anything except what you just expressed, right? And that kind of never say die attitude, and I'm gonna make this work no matter what is put in front of me. So, dude, I respect that totally, and I mean, personally, that's my mindset in my life too, as far as my personal goals and what I want to achieve with my life. And
well, can I
get up? Yeah, please go ahead.
Good question. How did you grow up? Can I ask you How
Yeah.
grew up?
Dude, very, very comfortably. Never wanted for anything really. My parents were together until I was a junior in college, so my home life was very comfortable.
What would be your view on, let's say, a minority? This is one of the topics one of the things, situations that are brought up in CRT, and this comes down to, I guess, the thick of things and many of the cultural differences in America, right? A black person is employed at a certain firm, right? Many people, the higher ups in the firm, right, look to ask the white guys if they want to play golf, right? And that can often lead to higher roles in management, higher positions, right? Because they know each other better, right?
Mm-hmm. Networking, informal networking, yeah.
Right, because they have the same culture. And, the black person or the Latino person or the minority is left out because he or she may not have that same cultural background or come from that same cultural background as that white person, right? So what do you think that he or she should do in order to gain advantages in the specific system or firm that he's currently in? What would you think that he should do?
I just want to say that ideally, and I guess fundamentally, they should not have to rig the system, and play. Like, I guess I'm saying ideally they wouldn't have to do that, but I'm not naive enough to think that's the way it is in the world. I think that if I were to recommend an approach, it's tough because this is a really vulnerable thing to do, but I would maybe recommend going to that manager or the leadership group and saying, hey, I didn't grow up playing this game and I'm not going to be potentially, as comfortable there or know how to play, but I would really love to be involved and I want to go. And yeah, I mean, I think acknowledging that, hey, not everybody is going to know this culture in this game in some way. And that person can be as direct or as indirect as they want, right? Like they can say, hey, I'm not in the country club, white guys club, and I'm not going to be able to, get the career advancement that everyone else is because you're not inviting me to go play golf. But that might, single them out, right? That might make them a target or fall out of favor or whatever, internal politics.
Me, I have a solution for.
Okay, go ahead.
You could just create your own. If you don't feel wanted somewhere, if you don't feel totally accepted anywhere, you could just create your own thing. You have the freedom to associate with whoever you want to, right? If I told you that you had to associate with a bunch of murderers, robbers, rapists immediately, starting tomorrow from my mandate, right? What would you think of that?
I mean, I guess you as my buddy telling me to do that is different than someone trying to climb the corporate ladder, right?
Of course, but again, everyone has the right to associate with who they want to associate with. That's, I guess, a part of, much of, America's classical liberalism. You have the freedom to associate with whoever you want. I don't have to tell you who you have to associate with.
Oh, okay. So sorry to interrupt you.
Right.
So are you saying from the perspective of the employers or the higher ups, and that like they don't have to be inclusive, or are you saying from the employee's perspective they should say F it and I don't need to join?
Yes, both. F it, you could just create your own thing. And I think this is one of the things that many minority groups, specifically Black people, we tend to look at the dominant society as being responsible of fulfilling all of our wants, needs, and desires, when we have agency in our own lives to, I guess, create our own destiny, right? Almost every immigrant group has done this, You can look at Asians, Jews, et cetera, Chinese. Every ethnic group in America has done this with when they weren't Irish Italians, when they weren't one somewhere, they just built their own, you know. And that's, I think, much of the dilemma that Black people are going through. You know, the Grammys and the Oscars, you know, cut many Black artists out of the awards. Well, if you don't think that you're wanted there, you should go somewhere else and create your own, right? Me, if I wasn't accepted on the rugby team, right, I would have just went and because of my ethnicity and my race, I would have just gone and created my own team. I believe now that I have the different mentality that I possess today. You know, I don't think I would have thought like that 4 or 5 years ago, but now, you know, I have a much greater emphasis on my own independence and my own agency.
That's a beautiful thing, man. I think that's an awesome message for everybody to absorb about autonomy. Two things there. One, so looking back on your rugby experience on the team, you know, did you feel accepted and would you, you know, knowing what you know now, would you kind of, I'm sure you would approach things differently because we were all 18, you know, a freshman year or whatever, but like with this mindset, you know, would you have, done things differently from that perspective?
Yeah. Well, I think that I think there's always just going to be people in life that just aren't going to like you, you know, for some reason. You know, they kind of just use race as a reason to say they don't really like you, or, you know. I think there's always just going to be people who don't like you in life. If I really had like enough motivation and energy to really want to create my own team, then, you know, I would have, but I felt that it wasn't really needed, you know. Me, I, you know, was one of the only minority kids or Black kids on the team. I guess it wasn't really that much of a culture shock or anything. You know, GW was trying to like institute this, you know, culture of inclusivity and diversity. And I believe that, you know, a lot of people, you know, kind of just went along with that whole thing, that whole notion. I'm not going to say that it wasn't all rosies and daisies, lollipop stuff, but you know, no, there was some things that I did that I'm not totally proud of and stuff, but you know, we were all just growing as people. So that's what I was. Of course, you're not the same person you were when you were 18 years old as you are when you're 23, 24, 25.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, so this is to go back to the employment one you referenced. So I would just push back on that, you know, create your own golf group thing, because it sounds like in that specific situation, and this probably does get replicated at companies all over the place, is that if the power and the prestige and the career advancement lies in a select group and they all happen to be white guys who play golf, you know, totally the minority individual can go create their own social group from work and have fun and find, you know, fulfillment and happiness and friendship from that. But if they have to get the clout and the political, the political capital to get promoted, then I think that's a problem. And like that mentality, while stellar for personal development, if it really is that much of a closed off group, you know, that's not going to get them the promotion necessarily.
Yes. No, a lot of things with higher ups, you know, a lot of it's just politics. They say Asians are very highly prevalent in entry level standard engineering roles in technology and in science, but when it comes to upper level management, they are underrepresented. It's just because they lack, you know, much of the skills that it takes to be in upper level management. You know, they're better, you know, with the technical work, or is it a culture of racism? What do you think?
Yeah. So I think to answer your question, it could be a bit of both. It could be
both.
And I do think, in fairness, like these corporations, especially as society progresses and does become more aware of bias, like these corporations are money printing machines and they're ruthless. And I feel like they will put oftentimes will put whoever's best equipped to do the job in the position. To be fair, like I do acknowledge that the meritocracy is at effect in a lot of ways.
Right. I want to come to that. That was one of the main points I wanted to talk about, and how CRT looks at the meritocracy. They pretty much say that the meritocracy is inherently biased and racist because the dominant society pretty much creates the standard, right? So it's not truly a meritocracy, right? Because the dominant society creates the norms and the standards within that system. It truly couldn't be fair to underprivileged or oppressed minority groups. The oppressor creates the standard, not the oppressed. So is it really a meritocracy? And I want to say to that, we can see, I don't think that's really true because, again, we see Asians, Indians, Nigerians, groups like these that come over to the United States and they're able to just excel past whites even. Is this really a race issue, right? Or is it just more of a cultural issue?
Well, those two things are enmeshed. I think that the answer is nuanced, and I guess I love the individualistic mindset. Like I said, it's personally what I adopt with my goals and what I'm doing with my life. And, I have a mindset where if I set a goal, I'm going to go do it. For example, this podcast, every Thursday for the next year, it's going to happen. And after a year, I'm going to evaluate where this podcast is going. That kind of thing. Like, I love that attitude. And I think that like this iron will, I'm going to fucking do this attitude is what it's all about. And
right.
On an individual level, I think that is a great thing for people to adopt. But for me, it's just the scale. And I guess once we see these results on a scale, instead of just anecdotally, oh, this person is a minority and excelled past a white person, I think once the data reflects, like, I guess a good way to do it would be to look at, I guess, two different things. So like to evaluate cleanly would be like college graduates by race with a 4-year degree,
right?
And then their progression in the workforce. Just roughly like what percentage of Black, White, Indian, Asian, Native,
right,
and whatever group, Latinx, and what level did they progress in their career? So 20% got to mid management, 10% got to senior management, 5% get to executive. That would be like a nice. We could do that today and look at that data.
I actually was reading a Wall Street Journal article on this.
Of course you were, Obi. Of course you were reading the journal.
I'm an economist. He's a Black economist who does a lot of things with Black people, and Black upliftment pretty much recommended this article. Pretty much showed the outcomes, and they're very, very, very disparate. It's unfortunate.
The outcomes of career progression for people with 4-year degrees.
Yes, between whites and Blacks. Okay,
so he did find a significant difference.
Yes, there's a huge difference.
So to me, that would point to something in the tally of the CRT framework.
Yes, but you can kind of level it down to the type of careers they tend to choose, what they major in, how much help they get from their parents, how much support they get, the graduation rates. Because a lot of people take out loans and they don't even graduate, but they still owe loans. There's a multitude of reasons, and I would say maybe racism is involved there, but no, actually there probably is some racism involved in these disparate outcomes. But to what extent does racism impact these disparate outcomes?
For sure, I think that is a much richer debate and something that is really arguable. I think for me, in my mindset right now, is just about how opportunities are afforded and dispersed. And I also want to acknowledge too that there are a lot of poor white people who are in a very similar economic and opportunity outlook to the kind of much described inner city Black person who, that narrative has been portrayed so much. And, and the fact that another one that would, for me, point in the column of the CRT argument is that, this image of what a Black person in the city is and what their life looks like is so dispersed and so prevalent, but that same image of the poor white person is not really dispersed in the culture. To me, that's like why is that? Why is that? I think that's something that can kind of be attributed to systemic
racism.
Racism. Yeah.
I have a pretty clear answer for that, and that's because, again, there are disparities between the races. Poor whites are generally a minority in this country compared to Blacks that make up a great amount of the poor in this country. They're pretty much the underclass in this country, unfortunately. We as Black people are seen as the underclass. We lead in pretty much all negative economic metrics in this country. Our outcomes just aren't there with poor whites, who are just seen mostly as an anomaly. So we're the face of poverty in this country.
Right. And that's what I'm saying. Like, that doesn't necessarily make sense when there are a ton of poor white people, and it's kind of like they might, it's like they could be the butt of a joke in a comedy movie of the redneck in the trailer, or the redneck who has an incestuous relationship with his cousin or whatever, but I don't know. And this could just be my bias too, but I just feel like the portrayals are really skewed, and this goes back to the equation of criminality to Blackness.
Right. I'm going to have to say this because I want things to get better. I just have to say the truth. There is a problem with a lot of crime in the inner city in America. There's a big problem with crime in the inner city in America. And but people don't really know the true realities of crime in the inner city. Most people in the inner city don't commit crime. There's only a few people who in these communities who are terrorizing these communities, unfortunately. And because of that, we see differences in many of the crime statistics in America. We make up 3%. Young Black men make up 3% of the population, and we commit 53% of the murders and 60% of the robberies. And this isn't even per capita. This is just total crime percentages by violent crimes. So, I have to say what's true and what's not true, because that's the only way things are going to get better. We're always trying to see the truth and to see what happens. I know from your perspective, from what you see, the redneck isn't seen or talked about as much as the poor Black person. I don't know if that's totally true, but I feel that you're looking at it from a tinted, privileged, white guilt glint. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Now, this is kind of pretty prevalent in our society today. This attitude of white guilt, this self-righteous attitude that I'm not specifically talking about you, but I'm speaking about other people who kind of come at this from a self-righteous viewpoint. People who really just don't, I believe, care about inner city minorities, Blacks or Latinos. They're trying to show how righteous and good they are by supporting these causes, right? They're trying to show in their pretty much majority white, non-minority, non-ethnic group how enlightened they are, and they're using pretty much minorities. I was watching a movie called Roots. It's actually a really TV series that came out in the 70s, and I was watching the second saga. If do you know what I'm talking about? Roots?
Not familiar, no.
Okay, it's a saga about a Black American family from slavery to the modern era. It really stops in the 1970s because that's when the guy he wrote that book, or the late 1960s, and he wrote the book in like the 70s. But in one of the episodes, it shows a bunch of New York Manhattanites inviting him to a party. This black guy to this party, and he's the only one there. He's one of the only two black people there, right? You could kind of see what he was trying to indicate by this. They kept on talking to him specifically about civil rights, and they're trying to show him to people who were trying to fight for civil rights for people, for black people down south. But you could kind of see what he was trying to indicate by this, of who these people really try to associate with. Their groups are just all white and non-diverse, and you could see that, hey, many of these people are just trying to be self-righteous with the way they go about race relations. It's not really genuine, because they wouldn't be acting this way or really showing these types of ways of thinking.
Yeah, for sure. It's virtue signaling, right? That's kind of the modern identifier of that. And yeah, dude, I'm not immune to these criticisms, man. And I don't want to shy away from that, because I think what you're saying is that these white people who are kind of touting these ideas and going along with the social media phrases and voting these certain ways, need to think about it and not just do it because it's the majority opinion in their circles, but actually think about it, talk about it, and have a good reason for doing what they're doing, and make it authentic, and have it come from a place of actually caring about people and not caring about their own reputations.
Absolutely. But mostly I would like them to really, I guess, tell the full story of why race is kind of the way it is here in America. And again, why we see things we see here in America, why we see many of the disparate outcomes here in America. Need to, again, be, I guess, a Mother Teresa or anything, but I feel like you need to just say the truth instead of being some self-righteous piece of crap who wants to win brownie points from his specific circle. I was talking about this with a famous judge, and he pretty much said it right. When he started to go up north and protest many of the conditions that poor black people were going through in many of the northern cities, pretty much just outed him. When he started to come out against the Vietnam War, when the labor movement in general, they kicked him out. They didn't want to listen to him anymore, because it came to their own backyard. Have you heard that term, NIMBY?
Yes, not in my backyard.
Yeah, not in my back. They didn't want that in their backyard. They were fine with doing it in the South. And I think that came down to other people trying to tell other people pretty much what their values should be, them wanting to tell the South the way you should be in order to gain some type of sanctimony, in some type of sanctimony in order to control a specific region in the country.
Yeah. And that's something I completely agree with you, man. I think everyone needs to own their own opinions and actually have it come from a genuine place and not from a place of trying to impress others. And there's a danger in publicizing ideas and going with the crowd and not thinking about it. And that's true on the right and the left. That's true of a lot of people who just don't think in general. But you're a very thoughtful guy, Obi, and this has been an absolute pleasure. And that's a good place to leave it off for the Three Things game. So what month is your birthday in, Obi?
It's in December.
December. Okay, I'm up. My birthday is on Thursday, bro. Let's go. Okay, so I'll read my question. Thanks, man. Yeah, hell yeah. So I'll have a question. I'll answer the question, and you'll have a different question.
Gotcha.
Here's my question. What are 3 things I have learned about time? Well, man, I think as young people, number one, we have time on our side. And I think, personally, I get anxious sometimes thinking about, am I doing the right thing with my life? Am I, making the most of my time? Am I on the right path? All those kind of things. But, time's on our side in that perspective is that we're really young and we have hopefully our whole lives ahead of us. So just to kind of chill out and not worry too much is a takeaway for me. Number 2 would be on the flip side is to not take it for granted, because anything can happen. All kinds of crazy things can happen and take time or mobility or autonomy or these beautiful brains that we have away from us. So it's kind of a balance of not wasting it and not letting it go by without trying to maximize time. And thirdly, time is a construction, man. It's not fucking real. Watch time is a construction created by humans to orient ourselves in space. And this time is not real. There is no 24-hour day. It's made up by us to help orient us and make us feel like we're making meaning of life on this asteroid, this rock in the universe.
Comment on that real quick?
Yeah, please.
Have you heard of the space-time continuum?
I've heard that term, but I don't know what it is.
Right. So the space-time continuum is essentially a 4-dimensional system, right? That pretty much talks of the relationship between space and time. So if you drop a firecracker on the ground, right, and that erupts, right, it goes off. You're pretty much establishing the concept of space. But if you drop, let's say, 5 firecrackers and they go off simultaneously, you're establishing the concept of time. So we get space-time continuum. Do you understand that?
Yeah, I mean, well, it sounds like context. Like you need reference points. You don't know about time and sequence without seeing things happen sequentially, right? Because like with the multiple firecrackers, you can contextualize which one happened first and see that time is passing.
Yes, right. So time can only goes linearly, right? While space can go backwards, forwards, to the side, horizontally, vertically. Time can only go in one direction. Space can go in a multitude of directions, right? So that's why time is one-dimensional, space is three-dimensional. We have the X, Y, Z plane. We established many of this in multivariable calculus and partial differential equations. So multivariable calculus involves the calculus of multiple variables, mostly 3 variables. Partial differential equations is the mathematics of how we relate derivatives to multiple variables. If we want to find a layer of curves, right, multiple layers of curves, right, for multiple variables, we would use a partial differential equation to find that out, and we would solve that based on the 3 variables we're given. In multivariable calculus, if we want to find all the area under a curve with relation to 3 variables, right, we would use multiple integrals, right? We can use double integrals, we can use triple integrals to find how the area under the curve of our 3 variables. Do you understand?
I'll take your word for it. Here's a question.
What are 3 things you have learned about food? Food is very diverse. There's a lot of implications about food. Me, generally, food is something that I just kind of easily burn off. It's not that big of a deal for me. I don't have to watch my calories or count my calories or anything like that. I'm pretty active most of the time, so food isn't.
Yeah, you're yoked, dude.
Yeah. How about you?
No, I go off of how active I am that day, and I eat kind of based on that. But I can put on weight pretty easily. But no, I'm aware of what I eat and the fuel, but I don't count calories either. Right on, man. Dude, well, Obi, time has flown and my time is up, unfortunately, but I would love to have you back on. This was a really insightful conversation, man. Thank you so much for contributing your thoughts, and I think you helped me apply a much more objective lens to a very emotional topic. So I thank you for that, and thanks for coming on the pod, man.
I appreciate it. Thank you.